Nigerian stew with chicken that's rich and flavorful. As expected, we'll start first with some tomatoes. I use the plum or Roma tomato type. I cut them into small pieces and I make sure to put them in the blender first because this makes it so I don't have to add much water. Next, I cut up the red bell pepper. You can see that I do it all in 2 batches. That's just because I can't fit everything into my blender at once. I usually slice off the little white pieces on the peppers, but that's just my preference. The red peppers really do add a great color and flavor to the stew, so that's why I use 4 of them. For some heat, I add 2 cent pepper. I go ahead and pluck off the stems and then add them to the blender. You can add as many as you like depending on your spice level. Next, I go ahead and use onion. I use a total of 1.5 onions when I'm blending. This half I actually go and save for when I make my chicken later. But the remaining 1.5 onions, I basically cut them into small pieces and put it in the blender. I put about half of it in now and then half will go in with the other batch that I'm making. I usually do use red onion when I'm making stew, but really I've used yellow also, so you can really honestly use whatever you have at home. It's not that serious. Now it's time to blend. So I have a powerful blender, so I don't really have to add any water at all since the tomatoes are on the bottom. But if you have to add some water, go ahead. If you can, try to add no more than 1/4 cup when grinding everything down. So pretty quickly you'll be able to see a very nice blended mixture, and you'll see this is the consistency. Next, I have a pot sitting on the stove set to medium-high heat. I go ahead and add the blended mixture so I can get it to reduce. Then I go ahead, cover it while I go back and blend the rest of the ingredients. Remember, this half of the onion we'll save to chop it up with the chicken later. Once we're done blending, we go ahead back to the pot and add the second batch so that everything can continue to reduce down. We let it cook on medium-high so that some of the water can evaporate away. The interesting thing is that it won't burn. You can just let it sit because there's no oil in it. After about 45 to 50 minutes, you'll check on it and see now that most of the water has been boiled off. This thickened mixture is perfect and exactly what you need. You can go ahead and set this aside. For me, I'll need this pot, so I go ahead and put it into a bowl and wash out the pot to get it ready for my chicken. The first thing I do is add the chopped onions to the pot. Remember, this is this half of the onion that I had set aside earlier. Then I add some Mrs. Dash seasoning. The description will have a link for the full recipe details. The next thing I add is adobo seasoning, followed by some chicken Knorr seasoning. Then I put some ground ginger, followed by some garlic powder. It's a lot of different seasonings, but it all really helps to develop the flavor of the meat. I go ahead and add 1 cup of water, and then I cover and allow it to cook for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I go ahead and check, stir everything around, and I can see it's coming along nicely. There's definitely lots of juice and flavor developing. I then add 1 additional cup of water and then go ahead and cover and allow it to cook again for some additional time. I want the chicken to be nice and tender. When I checked on it, for me, about 35 minutes later, the chicken was cooked very nicely, and at this point I was done. You can choose to go ahead and fry your chicken or broil it if you prefer, but this time I'm keeping it simple, so I'm going to keep it in this texture. So I cover it and set it aside. I add a generous amount of vegetable oil to a clean pot. It's a lot of oil, but it's needed to fry everything. Then I have the tomato paste, and I use an entire 6-ounce can of tomato paste and go ahead and add it to the oil to let the tomato paste begin to cook. I mix everything around with a spoon, and I actually tend to keep it on medium to medium-low heat just because it's very easy for this tomato paste to burn, and that's not what I want. The extra time that the tomato paste takes to cook is actually really needed because it helps to kind of remove that sour taste that exists. You can start to see that after some time, if you look closely, the texture really even does start to change. If you look closely, you can kind of sort of see what I mean right here. So I go ahead and bring my blended tomato mixture back and add it to the pot. This time, you have to be very careful to watch it closely and turn it frequently because it definitely will burn, and we don't want that. So during this whole process, I'm cooking with a very deep pot, so I don't even bother to cover it because the splatter doesn't get very far. If you need to cover it because of all the splatter of the oil, then definitely use a splatter guard with good ventilation as opposed to the regular lid. Again, I'm always stirring frequently, and after a good amount of time, I see that it's cooked nicely and I'm prepared to add my chicken and broth. Again, I'm not frying the chicken today, but you can choose to do that if you prefer. I go ahead and spoon all of the chicken back into the pot. And you'll see you have a good amount of chicken broth left over, and you definitely add all of that in because that's what's going to give that amazing flavor. So I turn and mix everything together. At this point is when you can decide to add some water if you want to loosen it and make it a little less thick. I'm actually choosing to keep it thick, but if you prefer, you can go ahead and add some water at this point. So now I add my curry powder, followed by the ground thyme. And again, I go ahead and mix everything together at this point. It's a very thick stew, like I said, so you can definitely feel free to add some water if you choose. Next, I add a total of 3 Maggi beef cubes. I don't show myself adding all of them, but they're basically the small beef cubes like this. So after I've added all 3 Maggi beef cubes, I go ahead and mix everything around again some more. Last thing is to add any additional salt to taste. I added a half a teaspoon in the end, but do this if you feel it's needed. And in the end, you're done. You have a beautiful, delicious, flavorful Nigerian stew. Simple, easy to make, straightforward. I have a bunch of different ways that I make stew. Each time I can use a different technique, but what's nice is it still tastes great. That's kind of one of the things that I love about stew. I think it's so versatile, and no two people tend to make their stew the same, and everyone's kind of free to just put their own touch on it.